Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a special Football 24/7 nightcap edition following the Eagles' initial 53-man roster. They came out across the NFL as a whole today at 4 p.m. I'm joined now by John McMullen, live from the NovaCare Complex, doing some late-night work on the initial roster cutdowns. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Tuesday evening, brother?
Doing well. It's finally here. We can finally talk, the initial roster. Obviously, if you were listening to Howie spoke about their mentality, which is essentially a 70-man roster. He even had a little bit of a slip when he talked about Patrick Johnson, sort of like he was still here. So you kind of get that backdoor feel of working out, a wink deal, and he'll be back on the practice squad. You can bet on that. So still a lot of work to be done, but first part of it is over.
Yep, no doubt. John, which names surprised you the most? There was definitely a couple ones I didn't expect. That edge rusher room I go to immediately, 5 wide receivers. They kept Kylan Granson sticks around. Both defensive tackles, as you pointed out, Byron Young and Gabe Hall, both make it. Couple names, John, that really stuck out to me, 11 deep on the offensive line. What stuck out to you, John, from the initial cutdowns?
The biggest was how deep they went on the offensive line and also how they handled it. Now, maybe Miles Hinton suffered an injury we didn't know about against the Jets in the final preseason game, but he starts on IR, designated to return. Cameron Williams being on the 53 surprises me. That's probably the biggest surprise to me. I thought maybe they would sort of play the roster games with Brett Toth, but he makes a 53-man spot as well. So they went very deep. Obo making it over Patrick Johnson was a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought Patrick earned it, but, he's one of those guys who's more of a special teams player. And I guess Howie's looking for more upside, especially with the questions. Didn't exactly speak about the edge room like it was a done deal, if you heard his press conference. So we'll see where that goes. It looks like they're going to push it off and see what they have in September and then maybe revisit it at that point. But we'll see who shakes out around the league. Obviously, the Eagles are not in a good position on the waiver wire, being 32nd. But you never know. Somebody might fall from that perspective. So still opportunities to come there. Most of the other stuff is how I thought it would go. I shifted at the last minute to Darius Cooper over Anaya Smith at wide receiver. That worked out. I had Kylan Granson making the team at tight end, so that worked out. Running backs went exactly. The linebackers were chalk. The defensive tackles, I had both Hall and Young making it, so that worked out. Safeties, they did go corners and safeties. I got as well. They kept 6 corners and only 4 safeties, so most of it was pretty predictable, with the exception, I would say, of Obo, and then just how they handled the offensive line. And then they did play the roster games with Charlie Hewlett, the long snapper. So yeah, we'll probably get these questions. They're gonna have a long snapper, and Charlie they did this a couple years ago with Rick Lovato. They cut him to keep a young player from the waiver wire. So Charlie will start on the practice squad. They'll elevate him and ultimately have to put him on the 53 after 3 elevations at the max. So he'll be back, but it's always sets off alarms. Oh, we don't have a long snapper. They're fine. They do it.
Yeah. John, a couple big surprises here from the roster. Not big surprises, but I don't think I expected Obo, John, to make it. What'd you think of that Obo making it over?
No, I didn't have him making it. I thought Patrick Johnson earned it. To to be
And he's
perfectly
got to
honest.
be, John, he's got to be pissed at this point. How many years has he put in a good training camp here and doesn't make the final or the initial roster?
Yeah, I even as long as I've been doing it, and people criticize me sometimes because I put such little emphasis on the preseason games. And the minute I put a little bit of emphasis on the preseason games, it bites you. It just doesn't matter because Patrick, outplayed basically,
Yeah.
the bottom three, other than Nolan and Jalix. He outplayed everybody else on that edge in that edge group, and he'll be back. He'll be back on the practice squad. But yeah, I mean, you got to feel if you're Patrick Johnson, like what do I have to do? Because he
Right.
performs not only in the preseason games where we've joked he's Mr. August, but also in practice. And I mean, it's one where I struggle with because you want to send the right message to the players on your team, and I'm like, if that guy's not making the team, and you're sort of a lower thought of pedigreed, whatever you want to describe it, I don't know if that sends the right message at times.
Yeah, we'll see we'll see. I good for Obo that makes the team, John. You think maybe they wanted some veteran presence, John, in that room. Obo is the oldest guy that was working there. I think he's 30 years old. Which
Yeah, he's the oldest player on defense as a
yeah.
whole. So with this initial 53. No, it's not that he played poorly because at times during camp I thought he was making a run. And you know what? If you kept Johnson and Obo over Azeez Ojulari, I wouldn't have batted an eye because they both played better than Azeez. But obviously they have more invested in Azeez Ojulari. Higher upside, perceived higher upside, whether that develops, we'll see. But yeah, I was a little surprised Obo made the 53, but that's not because he had a bad summer. It's just because I thought he was behind Patrick.
John, a case of the preseason not meaning much there with Patrick Johnson, but is it a little bit of a flip for Darius Cooper, who had one big preseason game? That was it. And then he ends up as the fifth receiver, John, taken today. Now, I do understand he had a good camp as a whole, so not just the preseason there, but your initial reaction to Darius Cooper, Johnny Mac, making the team. Anais Smith is out.
Yeah, and that probably is a good example because I think Anais failed his final test against the Jets, so that might be an example of the preseason mattering at least somewhat if it were close. But anytime somebody beats out a draft pick, and I imagine Anais will get through waivers and be back on the practice squad as well. But we'll see how that shakes out. Yeah, he deserved it, and I shipped it late to him making the team because he just performed. He consistently performed better, even though they kept giving Anais, chance after chance after chance, and just started dropping the football again and a little bit unsure on punt returns, which is interesting if, they're going to go with Cooper. We talked about that a little bit this morning, or Jahan Dotson, or if they go out and get somebody else, because they also cut Avery Williams. So, they have good punt returners. Cooper's great, and Jahan's good, I would say. But do they want to use those players in that role? That remains to be seen. But he deserves it. Now, what would have been interesting is if Johnny Wilson stayed healthy, would they have kept 6 receivers? And they might have, but that would have been interesting because obviously John Mechie being added to the mix late could have hurt Darius Cooper. So that injury made it a little bit easier to put him on the 53.
Yep, no doubt. Johnny Mac, offensive line, they kept 11 deep, brother. Interesting what they did there. And then you mentioned Hinton goes to the IR. That was kind of out of left field. What do you think about what they did there? The biggest surprise to me was Trevor Keegan makes the initial 53. I was surprised to see that. What do you think about the offensive line and what they did there?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised he made it, but I was surprised that both he and Toth made the initial 53.
Right.
The fact that they both did, I thought one would, depending how they would handle it, and I thought it would be easier to keep Keegan, so I went the Keegan routes. Because he would have to go through waivers where Toth would not have to go through waivers. So, but they kept them both, which surprised me. So, yeah, I don't know where he fits. Obviously, he's probably not big enough typically for what Jeff Stoutland wants at guard, and he's still a work in progress, to say the least, at center, having a lot of difficulties snapping the football. So, I expect him to be inactive on game days. And Howie kind of mentioned, look, you look at it as 1 through 48 as the guys who have got to be ready for the games. And then you have a few extra spots to use on players that you don't want to risk losing on waivers. And I thought, I thought he gave a really good answer too on why you do that and why you essentially, he hates using the term redshirt, but why you redshirt players. And he's like, and the best example, Lane has been talking about retirement. So, if you play this season and Lane decides to call it quits, well, you've been working with Cameron Williams for a whole year. Maybe he develops, maybe he doesn't develop. Maybe that saves you a top draft pick in next year's draft. So I thought he did a good job of explaining that and trying to keep some of those developmental players. Now, the Hinton injury came out of nowhere. It wasn't noticeable. None of us saw it, but that doesn't mean he didn't get hurt in the Jets game. And so it just shifted a little bit. I thought they would give the, sort of sprained ankle type injury to Cameron Williams and put him on IR and start with Hinton, but they just flipped that.
Yeah, I did read the Howie response on Cam Williams. That was, excuse me, that was pretty good stuff there from Howie Roseman. John, what else jumped out at you at the initial 53-man roster? I think we hit on some of the big names, but as you point out, Charlie Hewlett gets released. They're obviously going to have a long snapper. So as we know, this 53 isn't set in stone. Actually, some of these players who made the roster, John, they can't quite take a sigh of relief yet. Their job is still not locked in. Who do you think is on that bubble? Because they are going to have to maneuver a little bit more with Charlie Hewlett and a couple other spots.
Yeah, well, I think it starts with obviously that 11th offensive lineman, whoever you want to describe it. It's certainly not going to be Cam Williams, so it's Toth or Trevor Keegan. I think it starts there. I think, they went deep on the interior defensive line, but I think they like both Byron Young and Gabe Hall, so I'm not sure they want to give up on those guys. Darius Cooper, I think, is not, and that's always difficult for any undrafted rookie because, you want to breathe a sigh of relief when you make the initial 53, and then if something happens and, somebody they like gets through the waiver wire, which is a little bit easier for Darius because, again, they're 30 seconds. He could be gone just as quickly. And they'll want to get him back on the practice squad, but you get the point. The guys on the back end, the guys in that from 48 to 53, they can't rest. They can never rest really all season because you're always looking to churn and get better. And you'll see now it'll start as they get ready to start. They'll be on the practice field starting preparation for the Cowboys tomorrow afternoon. They'll have their practice squad back. They'll be on the practice field. You'll start to see them trying out players, bringing in players to look at, always looking to incrementally get better. But, yeah, the guys on the back end certainly can't rest.
John, I was thinking Darius Cooper would be kind of safe because they only kept 5 wide receivers. Interesting you still put him on that bubble list. Now, I agree he's on the bubble because of the nature of the player and that position, and he's obviously undrafted. And, if they do need the spot, it's certainly somebody they could think about. But only 5 receivers on the team right now, Johnny Mack. I mean, I didn't think they would move
Well,
on from him.
that would be if they bring in another receiver. They're not going to go with 4 receivers. They would be swapping out receivers.
You mean from somebody from outside the room, or like a practice squad guy, like a Terrace Marshall or somebody like that?
No, somebody from outside the organization. If they like somebody in the draft and they got cut, they pick them up and go in that direction, as they've done a lot. If you think about Jacorian Bennett's here from outside the organization from via trade. Well, John Mechie's here, Sam Howell's here. None of us envisioned any of that. So it can happen quickly. And certainly now when you have 1,000 players on the street, the back end roster guys can't ever breathe a sigh of relief.
John, your thoughts on the defensive linemen that they kept around? They kept around Gabe Hall and Byron Young. You kind of made a switch, I think, late on that, and kind of told me, hey, I think they're going to keep both of them. They end up keeping both of them. Your thoughts on the depth at that position?
Yeah, I think it's really good. Part of the reason why they traded Thomas Booker, I think they really like those 2 particular players. I don't think Ty Robinson's ready to play. Like, he's another back-end roster guy, but
you think he's the 5th guy in that room?
I think he's the 6th.
Oh, 6, right. They kept 6. Excuse me. That's what I meant.
So in other words, if they need people to play, it's going to be Byron Young and Gabe Hall before him. But he doesn't have to, but he is a draft pick, and the same with Cameron Williams. They're essentially going to get redshirted. And Ty has a chance to play at some point if he continues to improve behind the scenes. I don't think Cameron does, but they can breathe a little bit as back end roster players. Just there's a specific idea to redshirt those players,
right?
So they can rest a little bit. But I think it's going to be interesting to see who the 4th one is. Because I was debating that with some of the other beat reporters. I think Vic really likes Byron Young.
He's brought it. You kept telling me that, and he keeps bringing him up. He's giving him a nickname, all sorts of stuff.
So I think he's going to be the 4th guy, but Gabe's played well and is a little bit more versatile. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, which way they go, and it might be game to game. It might be. Byron's going to be the backup to Jordan Davis as well, so he's got to have those snaps which he's not. That's not his expertise, but he's the one most capable of doing it. And Gabe can play outside as well, so you're going to see some defensive tackles get some outside reps because I think of how weak the edge group is behind. Nolan and Jalix. And I think that with Morrow, I think that with Jalen Carter, and I think that with Gabe Hall, you might see them, not a lot, but occasionally getting outside reps as well.
Right. Those are the 3 names I was thinking as well. John, something that I think a lot of people are wondering at this point. 5 receivers kept. Anais Smith gone. Avery, now they might come back to the practice squad. So I don't say gone from a sense of gone. I mean just right now, initial 53. Anais done or released, and Avery Williams as well. Who is returning punts, Johnny Mack? Is it going to end up being Cooper DeJean, Johnny Mack?
Yeah, Nick got asked that question, and obviously, punted it, which is no pun intended. He doesn't have to give it away. I think you'll get a clearer view when we see what the practice squad looks like. Some people even brought up, I think Britton Covey got cut by the Rams.
Yeah.
So, maybe they bring him back. And they've done that in the past where they elevate him for 3 games and then add him to the roster. So, I mentioned it, like I would use Cooper in the role personally because he's one, to me, he'd be one of the best 5 punt returners in football. And I think that's an important role. when you're playing field position, when you're a run-heavy team like the Eagles, and he's great at it. And, personally, I don't believe in jinxes, or I don't believe in he's going to get hurt because he's on punt returns, and I don't believe he can legislate injuries. And I point out, Deion Sanders in his prime returned punts. It did just fine. But that's the new school mindset. It's like, all right, and I don't think they want him to return punts, and I think you'll get a clearer vision of what they're going to do. And Jahan Dotson can do it as well, and I think they'd be more receptive to that. And I think he would be fine at the role. And maybe they go that direction. But they have plenty of options. And if worse comes to worse and you got to put Cooper DeJean back there, you're probably better anyway. So
Yeah.
I don't know why everybody's worried about it.
Well, you definitely would be better. I think a lot of people, John, I don't know what it is. I think it's the nature of the new game has created a little bit of fear in the fan base as well. They hide, John, they put these players in bubble wrap a lot of the days outside of the game day. And now fans have kind of taken on that mentality as well. Cooper DeJean can't return punts. We'll see what they end up doing there. John, APR was let go. That we just talked about the edge rushers, and not a very deep room at this point. But what's kind of your expectation on the future for him? And do you think it's here in Philly? What do you think of APR, one of the draft picks who was released?
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't. I was trending late. I didn't keep him on my 53, but I wanted to. Boy, I think he's got a lot of upside. I'm a guy who watched every single practice, and he did not play well. But the guy I saw against the Jets in the preseason he just has traits that their other edge rushers don't have. Like, there's a natural sort of ability for great pass rushers to finish, and he's got that ability. I don't know if he's got the traits that it translates to the NFL level at his size. Obviously, he's got some size deficiencies. But he's just got the knack that a lot of guys don't have. And I would like to explore it further. And I'm a little bit surprised, and hopefully they get him back on the practice squad. But, he's a guy who might get claimed because of that game, similar to Eli Ricks back in the day of why the Eagles kept Eli, who got cut today. But they kept him for 2 years because of that Baltimore preseason game. And they didn't want to expose him to waivers. And, again, other teams didn't get to watch practice every day. All they see is the games. And they saw a hell of a performance, and they also have the college tape where he's, putting up Bruce Smith numbers at Virginia Tech. So, and it's a very valued position. So that's the one guy I would be concerned about losing on waivers if I were the Eagles.
John, explain to me like I'm 5 years old, because I see this all over social media, the long snapper situation. Why do they do this? I know it's to open a roster spot for a couple of weeks, but I don't know. I got like 3 comments already on my social media. People can't fathom what do you? One guy said, "Are the kickers snapping the ball to themselves?" And I'm like, all right, it's not that big of a deal. Just explain.
I'm with you. I don't know. Is it really that hard to understand? They're cutting him. He's a vested veteran. He's been around for a long time. He's not exposed to waivers. So they're cutting him, understanding he's coming back on the practice squad. They're saving a 53-man roster spot so they can keep a Cameron Williams and not expose him to waivers. And then you can elevate Charlie Hewlett on game day for up to 3 games before you have to add him to the 53. Ultimately, you have to add him, but by the 3rd game in, there's usually an injury, a sprained ankle, and it takes care of itself generally. If not, you got to make a difficult decision, and you got to cut somebody. Because once the elevations are out, you need a long snapper. But they've done this in the past. If people have paid attention, they did it with Rick Lovato one year for the same reason. They wanted to save a roster spot, and they had a vested long snapper who doesn't have to be exposed to waivers. So it's just a way to buy an extra roster spot for 3 games, essentially.
Yeah, good stuff there. And when he's vested like that, nobody can claim him. And I guess that they do work that out before, right, John? Like, I'll sign you to the practice squad. You'll stay there for a couple
Well,
of weeks. Yeah.
you're not allowed to say that, but yes, obviously. And, look, Charlie is a free agent right now, so he can sign with anybody. If he goes back to Cleveland, where he has, he's like a rock star in Cleveland. I don't know if they need a long snapper, but he could decide, you know what? No, I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to leave. He could do that. But generally, they have a very good feel if the player is amendable to it. And if not, they would sign, Kristen Johnstone. They had, when Charlie hurt his neck, they had him. So they have a dossier on other guys as well. But I would 99% say Charlie Hewlett is going to be the long snapper September 4th against the Dallas Cowboys.
Johnny Mac, good stuff there. John, they also kept 3 running backs with Ben Van Sumeren. Was that a surprise to you at all? I think that's kind of what we expected, but some speculated maybe they would only keep 3 between the 2 spots. So A.J. Dillon they keep, and Ben Van Sumeren they keep as well. Your thought on that?
Yeah, no, I had that. That's the 4 I had them keeping. There was some people who thought they may play those same roster games with A.J. Dillon. You could argue maybe they should have and kept APR from waivers and played that. Now, some guys, again, that's a 2-way street. Maybe AJ wouldn't be amenable to that, and some guys are, some guys aren't. But AJ deserved to make the team. He had a good summer, proved he was healthy, no issues. And I think the Eagles are really good at running back, backing up. I think Will Shipley's going to have a nice season as the backup, and I think A.J. Dillon's better than the typical 3rd running back they've had in recent years.
Yeah. Great, good stuff on that. Johnny Mac, I didn't get a chance to hear it all. I heard a couple snippets because I was producing the afternoon show here on Jacob Sports. But just your thoughts on the Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni press conference. I know you mentioned their comments briefly throughout this conversation and this segment here, but just anything that stuck out that they said. Obviously, that one quote, "We're not done here. We'll see what happens in the next 24 hours." And then he also talked about the early part of the season, September. So Howie kind of giving himself a big runway to keep working here. Your thoughts on their press conference this afternoon?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised on the way he talked about the edge room. Howie's not going to generally throw people under the bus, but he did mention sometimes you do it different ways and sometimes you have stars. He essentially said the guys we have now are not stars, which I was a little bit surprised at. He was talking about the backups, obviously. He knows, and I've been talking about that on the show. He knows they have to get better, specifically at that position, and they've also gone down the route. He really talked up, as he should, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Moro Ajomo in the interior.
Better talk them up when your edge rusher room looks like this.
Yeah, and they're going to have to play and dominate and make things easier for the edge guys. I think that's fair to say, and I think that's the way they're looking at it right now. But it would be very surprising. And you hope lightning strikes, and you hope, hey, maybe Ojulari's a game day player. Maybe he's not a practice player, and you hope lightning strikes. But if not, they're going to make a move at some point to get somebody.
Give me Trayvon Walker, John.
Yeah, well, again, that was probably, I shouldn't have mentioned that name, but
Oh, John. I've been running with that name since you said
yeah,
it.
well,
I've been
that's part
throwing
of
it
the
out
reason.
there. Come
Yeah,
on, let's get him.
I've already got some shit down here for mentioning that name, but um, it takes a two-way street. I have no idea if Jacksonville. In fact, I've said it pretty consistently. I have no idea why Jacksonville would want to trade him, other than they stink and you know, new regime, and maybe you want to reboot and gain more valuable draft picks.
Well, this
And
is why I think they trade him, John. How many players on that team right now could they trade? And I'm leaving out the quarterback from this and the draft pick they just took in Travis Hunter. How many players could they trade and field a number one overall pick or a first round draft pick? Probably two, him and Josh Allen. So
well,
with the new regime, and they don't want to pay him.
it's really difficult to even get a first round pick, as strange as it sounds.
Well, I agree, but I think they could get it from the Eagles with Trayvon.
Yeah, I don't know if they could. That's my point. Howie's like most general managers, and he doesn't want to trade. If it's a second rounder, yeah, sure. But first rounder, he's gonna push back on. He's always gonna push back on. Generally, unless it's an AJ Brown type player or somebody like that.
I'm out on that. I do not want that first round pick if it means give me Trayvon. I'm like first round pick. See ya, have a good life, enjoy Jacksonville. You're not going to get a good pick anyway.
Well, I think Howie might change his mind in September after he sees it.
Well, now I'm like, okay, now maybe not be a number one overall pick. That's what I think. I think Jacksonville his value is going to go down the further they go along here, because he's probably going to have only 1 year left on his deal, and then that new contract's going to have to be due. So I think now's the time for them to pounce if they were considering it.
Well, he might go on a 15 sack trajectory too, and maybe they say, yeah, we're not trading this guy. So
yeah,
it can work a lot of different ways. But yeah, I will continue to say really up until September 4th. And I will continue to say it. I am stunned that the Philadelphia Eagles are entering this season with this edge rushing room. I will continue to say it. Les said essentially the same thing this morning.
Yep, he did.
I'm sure you'll hear the similar things from Mike Gill and BLG, who are going to be on the show tomorrow. It's not controversial.
9 days, 9 days, 1 hour and 30 minutes. We'll be kicking off football.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't look good on paper, but we'll see. Maybe the backups perform better than they have in practice for most of the summer.
We'll see what ends up happening. Johnny Mac, your final thoughts on the initial 53-man roster, and we'll talk to you in the morning on a nice edition of Birds 365 after the roster cut down. Your final thoughts here tonight, my friend.
I thought it was, and that's, I thought most of the stuff happened before. So I thought it was a little bit, 5 trades in August for Howie. So, nothing happens at the buzzer, which I think people forget what happened before the buzzer. So I think most of the uncertainty came from the prior moves today. Really, the only surprises were, I think, Obo and keeping Toth and Keegan both, and then sort of flipping the red shirt route between Hinton and Williams. And again, maybe Miles legitimately got hurt in that Jets game, so try to uncover more about his particular injury. But it was pretty chalk today, but the bigger stuff happened before, and that was Jacorian Bennett and John Mechie and Sam Howell and guys like Darian Kennard leaving and Harrison Bryant leaving, who, by the way, is our boy JD around? I don't know if we're live on YouTube. You said
we are, yep.
He got cut in Houston, so maybe he'll come back. Maybe
JD's listening, John. He's checking in. All right, John, I'm going to leave you with this, all right? We've talked about the youth on this roster, and these are stats right here. I believe who put these out? Ruben Frank puts out, of the 24 defensive players on the 53 as of 4 p.m. Tuesday, only 3 of them are older than 26, and 14 of them are 24 or younger. John, that's a young team. That's a young defense, man.
Yeah, we've been talking about that for a while, how young it is. And, Obo is the only 30-year-old on the defense. Really, on the 90 man, they only had two. Parry Nickerson is 30. He got cut, obviously, today. Yeah, it's very, it was very young last year, but you had the mixed in Brandon Grahams, the Slays. You had mixed in, which you don't really have this year. And we're going to see how it works out. On field, I think they have obvious leaders, Reed Blankenship in the secondary. N'Kobe Dean is hurt. He's sort of the leader of the linebacker room, but I think Zach Bond can handle that. And Jordan Davis is a guy everybody sort of gravitates to up front. So I think you have those obvious leaders, but yeah, I mean, it's very young and there's not a ton of experience. Now, winning generally cures anything, and it'll cure that. But if there are some tough times and adversity starts to pile up a little bit, it'll be something to keep an eye on for sure.
No doubt. The young team and a 34% of the roster, John, as it stands today, was not a part of the Eagles at all last year. So big turnover for this team coming off a Super Bowl. Johnny Mac, we'll talk all about it tomorrow on Birds 365. Thank you for doing it tonight, brother. Get home safely from the NovaCare complex. Me and all of the great listeners of our programs appreciate the work you do. We'll talk to you in the morning, brother.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, J-Mac. There's Johnny Mac joining me here on a nightcap edition of Football 24/7, initial 53-man roster. Guys, how about those statistics? We'll talk about some of the players before I get out of here tonight. I want to welcome and thank everybody for being here. We had major YouTube problems today. I'm like, of course, on cutdown day at 4:45, YouTube crashes. It still crashed. I still can't edit anything. I can't edit the description. I can't edit my tags. I can't edit anything on YouTube. And I'm strict about that stuff because I think that helps us grow. So unfortunate, but at least we're live here. And I appreciate you guys being here. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Drop your comments down below. Guys, 18. I mentioned that number, 34%. 18 players who weren't with the Eagles at all last year are on the active roster right now or practice squad. All right. That's a lot. That's a lot of the team right there. All right. 8 rookies on the team right now as a 53-man roster, seven draft picks, and then Darius Cooper's your undrafted rookie right there. So pretty good. But here, how's this stat? Only 7 of the Eagles' 2024 opening day starters in Sao Paulo are no longer on the roster. All right. So not too crazy. 15 to 22 will be back, but still a lot of turnover there on the defense. So how many are starters? Dirty, that's a good question. I have to look a little deeper for that. I'm reading off Ruben Frank's report here that he put up some numbers on the thing. D. Hughes says, MFers listening daily to call J-Mac wrong, but keep coming back. I'm crying. That's funny, D. Hughes. Everybody loves Johnny Mac, whether they admit it or not. All right. Wayne the Pain says, sure do want us to get APR back on the team somehow. Sure hope another team doesn't snatch him up. Wayne, that was an interesting one, but Wayne, I'm kind of wondering, brother, hear me out. I just gave you the average age of that roster of that defense. Think about those numbers. They were pretty crazy. All right. What did I say? There were 14 are 24 or younger. That would be 15 with APR, and you'd lose somebody over 26. So I don't know. Maybe that Obo signing was more about the kind of the experience, the veteran presence of that player potentially. Who knows? But we'll see. Overall, pretty good though. I mean, look, I think the roster is decent right now. The defensive ends are a little bit of a concern, and I think they're still in a good spot. I do. I think they're still in a good spot. Let's see what they're able to do moving forward. I do think the Howie comments, guys, don't take them lightly. All right. Howie has been given some tidbits at his press conferences. He doesn't do that many of them, but when he does, he gives a little something we can hold on to. And another one here was, we're not done. All right. We're not done. And I think Howie's got some moves to make still. So we will see what happens. I'm going to get out of here tonight. I appreciate all you guys doing it. Let me see if I can get YouTube working again. All right. I got to figure that out, and I got to have a nice meal. So I'm going to do that right now. Appreciate all you guys listening in. We'll see you guys tomorrow, 8 a.m. on Birds 365. And for those who missed it, I'll have some post up on the channel tonight. Some content. If YouTube ever starts working, I'll get them posted up. So thank you guys for being here tonight. See you next time, everybody.
EAGLES, Eagles.